Okay, so I just wanted to add a quick video on how to figure out how to cut out your void shapes in order to construct them for the casting. So again, working from the same model that we had before. So I'm going to kind of make make my voids real quick just by reproducing the box. So like I mentioned in the first video, what you'll want to do, isolate this real quick. Okay, what you'll want to do is do like the Boolean intersection rather than the Boolean difference to figure out what those voids should be. So like, you're probably going to construct a box and then fill in these voids. So I'm going to do that Boolean intersection. So those are the shapes that I would have to actually construct to insert into the box, right? If I can copy this real quick, right? Like that's my box. And so those are the shapes I need to insert to and to put them in. So there's a couple ways I can do that. What I'd want to do is kind of either figure out how to make this shape. So one of the things I could plan out would be like, I could take this shape, and since I know it's a cylinder, I could start to basically like figure out how to cut it in the same way as what I just did a moment ago. In other words, I would want to start by making a cylinder, and then I would want to kind of create this form by cutting off flat faces at a certain angle, like to that cylinder. So let me show you how I would figure that out. I would go rotate 3D and kind of flatten it out first. And then I would also rotate just so that we're like straight with the cylinder, because we're going to take all our measurements from that cylinder, right? And so, yeah, I guess, okay, so one of the things you could do here, if I go to top view, would be to take this shape and go make 2D. There's the shape. And then what I would do is I would dimension this. And to add dimensions, remember we did that same thing in, and I would probably choose to do them in a different style. So just go to options, annotation, import, new, foot inch, textural. Okay, so dimension, that style. I have to scale it too in a sec, yeah. Edit style. All you gotta do is change the model space scale to 0, or sorry, to 1, not 0. 1, okay. Okay, so there we go. So we could get, okay, we have a cylinder. We know that it needs to be from, whatever this point is to whatever that point is. 6 inches and 3/4 long. We'd also want to kind of be mindful of what the dimension tolerance is, right? So if I go down to where I think it's like length units, so it's going to give me a resolution of 1/8 of an inch. That's probably pretty close, but because this is a physical model, I want to get a little bit better resolution. You can see that gives me a more precise dimension. Okay, and then I would do the same thing. So I'd go dim angle. And I could get this angle right here. This angle right here. So that way, like, this is going to give me the information I need to know to like make these cuts, right? So I know that if I have my cylinder, and I'll just make some kind of like construction lines. That I could like cut this line at 30 degrees, that I could cut this line at 60 degrees. So I can kind of line it up, let's say, with the angle of my cuts, and that would produce these edges. And just like I did, like I could dimension like how far down I need to start this cut, right? or how far down I need to start that cut, or how long the that edge is, and so on and so forth. So I would do it this way. I would kind of go from a make 2D and figure out what dimensions the angled cuts need to be at, and then what angles they need to be as well. So the other thing, of course, really quick, that I would do is I would go, I would make a rectangle around this. There's a quick way to do that. It's called a bounding box. So if I select all the edges, I can get like what's the outline basically. So like then I would also know, for example, which we could get from this dimension, but I would know that like, that I need to make an original cylinder at whatever, like 6 3/4 of an inch in length. Okay, and then I would do the same exact thing for the other cut. So I would go to my right view. If you don't have a right view anymore, you could go right click, set view, right. And then I would do the same thing, make 2D with my cylinder selected. Remember, make 2Ds will always show up in top view. Always show up near the origin. Okay, and I don't really need those lines, so I would go dimension, go into the quad. So I know what overall diameter of my cylinder is. And then I also know I guess what I would want to do, how would I do this? Okay, so I could rotate this around the center of the object, like if I use my center snap. It's not going to give me one, is it? So I could draw a line through the middle to find the center point too. That would work. So I could rotate this. Yeah, I don't care about that. Okay, and that way I could like dimension, like how far this is, like how far away, how far in to cut on the face, right? And then the only other thing we have to kind of be mindful of is like, then we're cutting, these cuts are perpendicular to this face. We just gotta make sure we're like mindful of that, right? These cuts are coming in perpendicular to that flat bottom face, right? Anyway, so that's how I would go about finding out what the perfect dimensions are. I think the other way you could do it, like I would do this, maybe you could do this in foam or in wax, either way. But especially if you're doing foam, one of the best techniques that you'll find is like just to layer it. For this, because they're just straight cylinders, like it wouldn't make as much sense, but like let's imagine, I'll rotate this around the center of the box. Let's imagine I'm doing that, right? So I have a really complex thing, kind of. And let's imagine, rather than try and figure out, okay, well, I have to make this cylinder and I have to carve that shape out of this cylinder in order to get them to intersect like that. I don't want to deal with that, right? What I want to do is make it all out of one thing. So again, I'm going to start by going Boolean union. Now I have one object, and I just want to construct this object as best I can. Now I will say this is going to be kind of messy because these cylinders are so big. Let me actually just reconstruct with thinner cylinders quickly. Okay, so same thing like before. Let's imagine this is the void I want to make. I would do a Boolean difference. Gotta make sure I have the solid one selected. Okay. No, sorry. Boolean intersection. Oops, I guess I have to do that. First set, okay. Do it kind of in order. Okay, great. Just hide that real quick. And then, okay, it already unified this. So again, so let's imagine we wanted to make this out of foam. We didn't want to bother figuring out how all these weird cylinder intersections happen. The other way we can do this is we can make like contours. So I'm going to make a box around this form. Now this one fills the whole void, but imagine you had one that didn't. So what I can do is I can go, again, bounding box, which also works for 3D geometry. It'll like make a box at the extents, the like, edges in each direction of the box, of the geometry. And then I select that and I go contour. And so what it's going to ask me for is where do I want to start? I want to start at the bottom. You could start at one of the sides too. It doesn't matter which direction you go. Then it's going to say direction perpendicular. In other words, if I draw a straight line up, it's going to give me horizontal contours. And if I draw a straight line across, it's going to give me vertical contours. Let's imagine I'm doing horizontal contours. I'll draw a straight line up. And this is important. It's going to say distance between contours. And this, you want to put in whatever thickness your material is that you're using. So if I'm using my 1-inch foam insulation, I'm going to leave it at 1 inch. Go ahead and press enter. And so that right there just gave me a set of outlines, horizontal outlines, so perpendicular to that line I just drew. And each one is, like, let me unmove it. Each one is at the exact intersection with my shape, right? And so what this would kind of allow me to do is, let's imagine I wanted to cut this out of one form. I could take each of these outlines, I could take all these outlines, I think. Oops, no, extrude, curve. And I know they're 1 inch apart, so I would extrude them by 1 inch. I would also check this option solid. See how right now when I'm extruding them, like they're open? The kind of outlined edge is like open. So if I hit solid, they'll make it into a solid, closed shape. So I'll just hit 1, enter. Okay. Now, if I were to make, so basically what I'm getting is like I'm getting a rough estimation of what I would need to cut out in layers in order to make this geometry. And then, so what I would do is I would make this my template, basically. I would make this my template. I would cut out these little layers, these little blocks. So if you have a printer, you can make these printout shapes, or you can do little drawings like we had done with our cylinder and kind of do measurements and make cutouts that way. I could cut out these individual shapes out of foam and glue them and stack them up, and then I would just sand them down to where they need to be to get kind of a cylindrical, shape. And the only thing to really be mindful of is, again, and especially this is especially true with like, where am I? Okay. So like what'll happen is this, right? So we're going to not necessarily capture all of it. So if we go back to when I extruded it, what I would do is I would extrude curve in both directions. So where it says both sides here, I would say yes. And then I would extrude it by 0.5. Right? And that way we're going to capture more of what that shape should be. But you want to do it this way, because this will allow you to like see, oh, well, I need to like add a little bit to that outline or this outline. Like I would need to add some to this layer, for example, just to kind of capture it all. Okay, and of course you could also do contours that are closer together. That's kind of easier. But basically, like if you can get close enough and then kind of sand it to whatever surface you need, that's really all that's important for this assignment. And so then you'd construct that and kind of sand it or smooth it in whatever way you want. That would become your void. Okay. So those are kind of two techniques for figuring out how to, get the measurements and work um, from Rhino into physical model in terms of making these voids that you're going to carve out. I'm going to go ahead and end it there.